Not a handshake. You can imagine it would be quite frosty if you're a Ukrainian official coming into a room with officials from a country that have been invading your country for 3 years. It was certainly tense, particularly a lot of skepticism on the Ukrainian side, because they had a feeling that this was just an orchestration, a choreography, a playing for time by the Russian side, not a serious discussion. We heard that from President Zelensky, who said the only person in Russia who makes decisions of this scale is Vladimir Putin. If he does not engage with these talks, no progress can be made. And it's not just the Ukrainians. Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, said we do not have high hopes for this meeting.
He's the editor of the Rich List here on the show just after 3 o'clock. Now, let's turn our attention to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Officials from two countries are meeting in Istanbul in Turkey as we speak for the first face-to-face talks between the two sides for 3 years. Now, the lead up, though, was marked by confusion. President Zelensky travelled to Turkey, but then President Putin didn't. Then Zelensky called him disrespectful and not serious for not attending. Then Donald Trump was another person who chose not to join the talks. Speaking at the end of his visit to the Middle East today, he told reporters that he wants to meet President Putin as soon as possible.
You know, they all said Putin was going and Zelensky was going, and I said, if I don't go, I guarantee Putin's not going. And he didn't go, and I understand that, but we're going to get it. We're going to get it done. We got to get it done. 5,000 young people are being killed every single week on average, and we're going to get it done.
Were you surprised when Zelensky didn't show up either, sir? Were you surprised when Zelensky didn't show up either?
No, he didn't show up because he heard Putin wasn't going, so...
Well, let's now speak with Alex Cadier, who is a journalist for TVP World in Istanbul. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Aisha.
So tell us what you know so far about how the talks are progressing and what's going on.
Well, the talks are ongoing, and it's in its own way a small historic moment. It's the first time the two sides have publicly spoken directly since March 2022, a month after the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. There was a huge game of diplomatic chicken between Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin himself had called for direct talks, and Zelensky said, great, I'll meet you in Istanbul. I'll be there ready to start these talks at the highest level. So there was a lot of pressure from Ukraine, from the Europeans, on President Putin to show up. We now all know that he did no such thing. It was seen certainly by many as a step towards peace by Volodymyr Zelensky, and not a step out of Moscow by Vladimir Putin. So these delegations meeting, let me give you a run through of who is in the room. The Ukrainian delegation led by Rustem Umerov, the defense minister of Ukraine. Andrei Sybiha, the foreign minister, is also there. On the other side, you have a deputy foreign minister of Russia, a deputy defense minister of Russia, and a presidential advisor to Vladimir Putin. Now, diplomatic sources are saying, perhaps unsurprisingly, that the Russian demands are totally unacceptable for the Ukrainian side. They want all 4 oblasts from the Ukrainian territory that Russia has partly occupied, and they want the full removal of Ukrainian troops from its territory to enable a ceasefire. Those will be seen as completely unacceptable by the Ukrainians.
And look, just in terms of some of the choreography, because as you say, this is the first point that officials have met. Do we know what the atmosphere was like in the room? Was it cordial? Did they shake hands?
Not a handshake. You can imagine it would be quite frosty if you're a Ukrainian official coming into a room with officials from a country that have been invading your country for 3 years. It was certainly tense, particularly a lot of skepticism on the Ukrainian side, because they had a feeling that this was just an orchestration, a choreography, a playing for time by the Russian side, not a serious discussion. We heard that from President Zelensky, who said the only person in Russia who makes decisions of this scale is Vladimir Putin. If he does not engage with these talks, no progress can be made. And it's not just the Ukrainians. Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, said we do not have high hopes for this meeting. And a really interesting detail as to whether or not there is a hope for a breakthrough here. European leaders are currently meeting in Tirana. Keir Starmer is there for the European political community. Keir Starmer saying that Vladimir Putin is not serious about peace. Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission president, saying the next round of EU sanctions against Russia will include much tougher stuff like sanctions against Nord Stream, a cap on crude oil prices. So European leaders are clearly preparing to to sanction Russia. They are expecting there will be no positive outcomes from these talks. The US is not hopeful. The Ukrainians are not hopeful, to say the very least. And European powers are preparing to respond to a failure of progress on the Russian side. So as much as there is a historic moment that these two sides are in the same room, they are very, very, very far apart in their positions.
And Alex, just as well, how long is this? Like, is this one day of talks, or how long are the talks going to go on for?
Well, that's a slight how long is a piece of string, Aisha. We don't know the exact duration, but again, sources from the Ukrainian side say they have information that suggests that the Russian side is effectively going to pack up immediately after these talks, head to the hotel, head to the airport, perhaps throw in a press conference, and then get out of Istanbul quite quickly. That does not show, from the Ukrainian perspective, a desire from the Russian side to engage in these talks seriously. Now, the presidential advisor to Vladimir Putin, leading the Russian delegation, said that they are in a constructive mood. They would even consider compromises. But if those diplomatic sources saying that Russia wants all 4 regions of Ukraine plus the full removal of Ukrainian troops as part of a condition to start these talks, they will know that that is an impossible demand for the Ukrainian side, and therefore these talks will go nowhere. If it does transpire that the Russian side have this meeting, take the pictures, and so everyone can say the talks happened, but then immediately leave without really engaging in the substantive discussion, of course, top of the agenda on the Ukrainian side is that 30-day ceasefire. Keir Starmer called for it. Friedrich Merz of Germany called for it. Emmanuel Macron, when they were in Kyiv, all said it has to be a 30-day ceasefire, full ceasefire, or we will hit Russia with more sanctions. That was, in theory, endorsed by President Trump. But as you heard in the clip you just played, said, oh, Putin didn't go to Istanbul. I understand. I will have to step in and meet with him. So it seems the Ukrainians, despite having tried to put pressure on Vladimir Putin and the Europeans ratcheting up their pressure, President Trump may be the linchpin in these discussions.
Well, Alex, thanks very much for your time. It's very, very helpful update. Thank you. That's Alex Cadier, who's a journalist for TVP World in Istanbul. Someone's just...
I don't take any hope, and no hope, because it was a lot conversation before, no results, the same situation. So if I will see anything changed in better situation for us, then yes. But now I just don't believe. I just do my work to our victory, to stop the war, this terrible war.